All right, so in the next section, the primary goal here, at least today anyway, is to continue looking at truth tables, but there's two more types of statements that we haven't looked at, and those are the conditional and biconditional statements, those that are connected by if-then or if and only if. All right, so our goal is just to get through the first two, and then we'll look at more compound statements later. But before we fill this out, I'm going to, and it's in the notes, but I'll just pose a question and you guys can think about this and see if it makes sense or not. Okay? So let's say that I say, if everybody aces the quiz today, then I'll bring in donuts tomorrow. Yeah, sure. So I'll lay it out there now. If everyone aced that quiz today, then I'll bring in some donuts for this class tomorrow. I'll even go out during my lunch, run over and get some donuts and bring them over. Right? So now think about that scenario, right? Now, let's say that you all ace the quiz. And tomorrow I show up with donuts. Would I have kept my promise?
Yes.
No. Who said no? Yes. Yes, of course I would have kept my promise. Everybody aced the... Kept. Okay. Just didn't hear me. So does that make sense to everybody? If I say, hey, if everybody gets an A today, then I'll bring in donuts tomorrow. And then tomorrow, everybody's got donuts, and everybody did a good job. Okay. Yes. Next scenario. Let's say that you don't all ace the quiz, and I do not show up with donuts tomorrow then. Would I have broken a promise there? No. So still good, right? I'm still at least an okay teacher, not the evil one that promises you things, right? That's two scenarios. What if you all get an A, but I don't show up with donuts tomorrow? Would I have broken my promise? So that's the one case where you're going to be upset, right? We all got an A. Where the heck are our donuts, right? So far, 1 out of 3, our promise has been broken, correct? Okay. Last case. Let's say not everybody aces it, but I show up with donuts tomorrow anyway. Would I have broken a promise? No. Pleasant surprise. You still get donuts, but I didn't break any promises, right? So what was the one case again where a promise was broken? Where you did what you had to do, right? And then I did not follow through. That would be the example of first part is true, and then I'd be the second part, and then the second part would be false. Does that make sense? And that was the one and only time that promises were broken and people are upset. Yes? So let's look at the truth table now. Okay? So if we're filling this out, an if-then statement, we've pretty much highlighted the one red flag or the one thing you need to be careful with, and that's you guys doing what you said you were going to do or what the deal was, right? And then me not following through with my end. That's when an if-then statement is false. Every other case is true. Okay? And you can just, same exact values here. It's not any different. This just has statements attached to it. And here's the summary. So you need to remember, so far you have knowledge of, or you should have knowledge of two basic truth things. If we have an and statement, what are you looking for there? Both to be true. Overall true then. Everything else false, right? What about an or statement? At least one of them has to be true. And now we're adding in a third. If we have an if-then statement, we're looking for first half or you guys to do your end of the bargain and then not promise not being kept. True and then false. Everything else is true. Does that make sense? Okay? Now, we'll fill this in later. We'll come back to the example 1. Let's go to the second one, which is now the biconditional. Okay? So, same scenario, but now we're connecting things with an if and only if. So, I will bring donuts tomorrow if and only if everyone gets an A on the quiz today. Or I could say it the other way. If everyone gets an A on the quiz today, if and only if I bring donuts tomorrow. Okay? This is a little stricter. This is what most people mean when they say, if you clean your room, then you can go out. This is the scenario where you do what you say you're going to do and consequences should happen, right? If you don't follow up or don't do what you're supposed to do, there's a consequence for that as well. Okay? So what you need to remember here is that as long as the truth values, so if truth values are the same, then it's true. Okay? So in other words, first scenario, everyone got an A. I show up with donuts tomorrow. Everyone's happy, right? Let's look at the last case. You do not get an A tomorrow. Therefore, I do not show up with donuts. Does that make sense? Okay. The other two, whether you get donuts or not, because this is a strong connection here that one thing happens with the other, or if it doesn't happen, then the other thing also does not happen, these are false. So if you were to ace the quiz and then I show up with donuts, well, I'm sorry, this one makes sense. If you were to ace the quiz, and I do not show up with donuts tomorrow, that's bad, right? Promise was broken, okay? And with an if and only if, you can argue it the same way with vice versa. So if you do not get A's on the quiz, but I show up with donuts tomorrow, you would still say, well, that's not what you said yesterday. You said, donuts would be brought if and only if we got A's. We didn't get A's, so why are you bringing donuts? Now you're just confusing us. Do you see what I'm saying? So you just got to remember here, if the truth values are the same, doesn't matter if it's true or false, then the whole statement is true. Okay? Well, let's go back and do the example here. Okay. So this one's interesting. The parentheses aren't there, so we're going to have to kind of put them in following that order that we've talked about, right? So out of all the symbols that we have here, which of these is the strongest? The conditional. So that means everything before it gets a set of parentheses, and everything after it gets a set. But I'm not going to put a set around just Q. I'm just going to leave it like that. I don't need parentheses there. Okay? And now here, we have an and, so we can go get these two together, and then connect that with the negation of P with an or there. Okay? So let's see if we can squeeze 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We might have to throw in another column here, but all right. So let's just start building and see what happens here. So we have P. Here's how we'll fit it in. Let's split this into 2. Q. And again, we have true, 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 false, false, true, and false, false for our scenarios. Okay? And we've already done this, but 2 letters, 4 rows. That's not news to anybody at this point. If it is, you really should come in and see me pretty soon. So let's look at what we need here. First, we need to negate P. Do you guys see that? And we need to negate Q. Once these are both negated, then you could go into the green here and do P and not Q. And once you have that, now you can expand to the red. And now we say P and not Q, or not P. And now once you have all of the red taken care of, now you can combine this whole thing into an if-then statement. So now we have P and not Q, or not P. All of those have parentheses. Then Q. Okay, let's just do this one together. What should this first column be? Good. Next one. It's false, true, false, true. And now for this one, first, second, third, fourth, right? What two columns am I looking at? First and the fourth one. These two right here. Okay, and what do I need for this to be true? Both true. Very good. Because that's an and statement. So first one will be false. Second one is true. Next one's false. And the last one's false. Now, which two columns do I look at? So this red one here and this one, right? And that's connected with an or. So what do we need there? At least one true. So this would be false, true, true, true. Everybody with that so far? Okay. So far, nothing's really new, right? The only part that's new now is the conclusion. If we have an if-then, we just talked about it, what's the only time that an if-then statement is false? Look above if you need it. There's only one time when an if-then or a conditional statement is false. If the first part is true, you guys do what I asked you to, right? But then the second half is false. I don't follow through. Does that make sense? So when does that happen? So now we're looking at the second column and the sixth column, these two with the stars. But keep the order in mind, because really what I'm looking at is this column first, because that's the first half of the if-then, and then this last column here would be the Q column. Does that make sense? So what is the first case? False and then true is true. Remember, the only time an if-then is false, maybe we should do that. Do we see any trues and then falses? This one and the last one. This one's true. Okay? That's a good place to stop for now, because I think Jared is confused.
No, I'm fine now.
Okay.
I thought you said the only time it's true.